News Radio 710 Keel is your news and weather station.
News Radio 710 Keel, Robert J. Wright and Aaron McCarty, and as they say on TV, super surprise turbos. A guest star this morning is former Mayor Cedric Glover.
Cool is this?
A bit of a hullabaloo, brouhaha over statements that it was sort of short of a manifesto on your Facebook page regarding things that happened during your tenure as mayor regarding the General Motors plant, and you were sort of bringing us up to date on how the building got empty and what you guys tried to do to save it, and
then you realized you weren't going to save GM and you had to move elsewhere.
Do you want to pick up?
Well, when you realize you're not going to save GM, then the question becomes what's next. So what's next is we don't need to end up with this facility in the hands of a private individual whose agenda is entirely about maximizing their return as opposed to trying to ensure that this is leveraged for the benefit of the community.
But isn't that how you describe it now?
Well, that's what ended up. But that's not how the mechanism was intended to work. Because you go back to my AT&T scenario.
Your intentions were
there was a collective group of us.
How did B end up?
Because if you go to the Racer Trust website, it says as its goal, its objective, is the empowerment of automotive communities to put us in a position that now that we have a shuttered a manufacturing facility, how do we ensure that you don't end up with the exact scenario that we've got right now?
Their specialty, and I don't mean in a bad way, their specialty is going to places like Shreveport who have big old factories closed down and helping them to market them for something new.
Exactly. Facilitating them being marketed and transition to something new. That's the only reason. Look, we're talking about a huge modern facility. In fact, as I mentioned, only second to Lansing plant in terms of GM investment. This is not some old 100-plus-year-old broken down, middle of Ohio, Detroit, somewhere else, GM stamping plant.
State-of-the-art sort.
This is state-of-the-art.
Yeah.
But now, what was the purchase price? $7.5 million.
Yep.
That's only possible if you got a process in place that is saying we have a larger mission, not to maximize the return in terms of the sale, but to ensure that these assets are leveraged because the local communities have invested in these facilities just as GM has.
That's my $7.5 million, right?
Well, that's your not just the $7.5 million in terms of the local Caddo Parish tax dollars that were invested, but over the years. The reason why the GM plant isn't in the city limits of Shreveport because they never wanted to deal with the tax implications of being inside the city limits.
Sure.
So we'd have to do that song and dance about doing the abatements and waivers and what have you, like the parish does. You've got to be in the parish because you've got to be somewhere.
Saw the KSLA report saying that Stuart Lichter with the Industrial Realty Group was kind of blaming it on the state, that the state took over these Land Rover discussions and he was kind of left out of the loop.
But you've got to even go back before then, before the consummation of the sale of the facility from the Racer Trust, which is GM, the old GM, to the parish. There were efforts to try and say we don't need to have the IRG folks as involved in this because there are already prospects that are showing up to actually have us accomplish what the goal is. What became the goal when we heard the plant's closing? Let's see how it is that we manage to be able to make this a job creator and a wealth creator just as it was before.
Then how did Lichter and this Racer group end up with control of the building?
Because the Racer Trust insisted, the folks involved with the Racer Trust, which is Bruce Rasher and Elliot Laws, these are the folks who head up the Racer Trust. They were folks who dictated the terms, as you now can go back and reconstruct it, that all involved Stuart Lichter and IRG being integral parts of this overall equation. And that's something that never should have done. You've seen me reference. You've seen me reference in my Facebook post.
Well, pardon me, who was aware of that and who wasn't aware of that when that deal was done?
Well, all of us who were involved at the state level, folks obviously at the parish level. As the mayor, I was at a ringside role in this situation until the folks at the parish, because it's not technically inside the city limits, stepped in and said that we want Lichter and IRG and those folks dealing exclusively with us because we're going to go and be the ones that will look to use the Industrial Development Board to acquire the facility and provide the funding and what have you. And so those actual intents, specific negotiations took place with folks who were at the parish and the state level, and as the city, we were kind of sitting around the edge of it.
How did you feel about getting bumped out of those negotiations, or was there no choice?
I understand that the more important thing, as opposed to me being involved in those negotiations, you should have had economic development professionals involved in those negotiations. And that is people who are involved every day in doing the business of retaining and expanding businesses in Shreveport, and those who also out there doing the job of attracting those businesses. That's a specific skill set. That's a specific background and a profession that you do not need to put in the back burner of these types of situations.
We need to go to break here in just a couple of seconds.
But I want you to tell me, what do we need to do now? And is Elio now a pipe dream? You were a supporter. We now need to focus on whether we got to take a break.
We'll pick it up when we come back.
You ruminate on those.
What I want to cover is also, did Caddo Parish, the people that negotiated with the racer group, did they get a bad deal? Did they do a bad deal?
This is a horrible deal. This is not just a bad deal. This is a horrible